It's absolutely bat insane.
They got 7 starters, I feel like, in their top 7 picks.
The way that flipped all the way to, like, he's just not good, it gave me whiplash.
Yeah, the evil empire might be coming back here pretty soon. If you're going to take a quarterback there, you take Shedeur Sanders. I'm sorry, and you deal with it. He's a freak athlete. Like, he's a top 15 player in a class that doesn't have a ton of blue chip talent.
I saw the Browns as kind of hanging in the background in this draft. Could not have been anything further from the truth. Welcome to the NFL on Fox podcast. I am your host, Dave Helman, and it's in the books. It's done. The 2025 NFL Draft has concluded. 257 picks across 3 days. So much to get through, so much to consider. We're going to be joined later on in the show. My guy, Nick Baumgardner of The Athletic, is going to join me to go over the good and the bad, if you want to call them grades, we can. Looking at different classes, processes, strategies we liked, some that we didn't. And I said it to Nick at the time, and I'll say it again. I feel so strangely optimistic after a draft because it is normal to see NFL teams do puzzling things with their draft picks. The vast majority of the teams in the league coming out of the 2025 draft, I get it. I see it. I like it. I enjoy the thought process. I like a lot of these picks. It's hard to look around the NFL and say, this team had a bad draft in this year in particular. I really believe that. We'll get to that with Nick. We did, don't worry. We did find a few that maybe we didn't like so much, but by and large, I think a very positive draft in terms of teams making smart, sensible decisions, not reaching for needs, not being desperate, not getting crazy. All in all, a very sound NFL draft for the vast majority of the league. There is one team, however, that really sticks out. And I don't know if it's good or bad yet. We probably won't know for quite some time. But I entered this draft with a lot of ideas about what the memory would be, what the team to talk about would be. And I'll be honest, they're the focal point of the draft a lot, but I did not expect in 2025 that I would be thinking this much about the Cleveland Browns, who, for my money, are unequivocally the team of this draft. Like I said, for better or for worse. On Thursday morning ahead of the draft, I thought the Browns were in for kind of a boring weekend. They're sitting at number 2. You know Cam Ward is going to go number 1 to the Tennessee Titans. That was decided months ago. I didn't think that the Browns were ever in serious play to draft Shedeur Sanders at number 2 overall. I sure as hell didn't think they'd draft him at number 144 overall either, which is exactly what happened. But that's not even the craziest thing. I thought the Browns would hang out at number 2 and take the player that wasn't Cam Ward, whether it's Travis Hunter, whether it's Abdul Carter. I thought they would stick and pick and just be boring and have a relatively boring weekend. Maybe you draft a quarterback later if there's one that you like. None of that went to plan because within 10 minutes of this all kicking off, the Browns trade out of the 2 spot. The Jacksonville Jaguars give up a bunch to go get Travis Hunter, the two-way player, Heisman Trophy winner. They make arguably the biggest splash of draft weekend. And the Browns are left to weigh the decision of, was it the right call to trade away from a guy that's arguably the best receiver and arguably the best corner in the draft? Even if we got a future one, even if we still drafted Mason Graham, the Michigan D tackle at number 5 overall, even if we have all these reasons to like what we did, are we going to regret this? The way that we regretted not drafting Julio Jones and letting the Atlanta Falcons go get him a decade plus ago. That's juicy enough in its own right. But then Shedeur Sanders' slide becomes a story that lasts until Saturday evening. Plenty of people thought Shedeur Sanders might slide. Plenty of people had him falling out of the first round. That wasn't even a shocker on Thursday night when we recapped all of this. I sure as hell didn't expect him to go in the middle of day 3. And even if that was expected by, no, it wasn't. It wasn't expected by anybody. But even still, I sure as hell didn't think it would be the Cleveland Browns that took him after they drafted Dillon Gabriel, number 94 overall, 14 hours before he was picked. The whole thing is just bonkers. The way that we got here, the way that Shedeur was seen as a possible top 3 pick for months, the way that there was pushback to that, but then there was pushback to the idea of him falling out of the first round. And then Friday night, as the tumble continued and team after team decided he wasn't worth it, the Pittsburgh Steelers famously deciding not to draft Shedeur Sanders, and now they'll be faced with those questions. The New Orleans Saints are another one. How well Shedeur Sanders takes this opportunity in Cleveland is going to define so many things, obviously for the Cleveland Browns, but also for other quarterback needy teams that decided he wasn't worth it. And I'll throw in my 2 cents. It's pretty obvious to me that the worth of Shedeur Sanders far outclips his ability on the football field. I just want to say it for the record. The guy's a good quarterback. He might not have been worthy of a top 5 pick. I would argue probably not worthy of having his number retired at Colorado. He's definitely a good football player. He definitely shouldn't have been waiting as long as he had, but, and I'll steal this from Ian Rappaport of NFL Network, who I think nailed it, call it the Tim Tebow effect. When you are so famous and so polarizing that you are guaranteed to be the biggest story on your team once you're drafted, it's a hell of a sell to an NFL team to draft you to be not the starter. And that is clearly what was going to be the case for Shedeur Sanders once he continued to fall. Really, pick 83 in the 3rd round, the Pittsburgh Steelers had a chance to draft Shedeur Sanders to at least fight for their starting job in the 3rd round. And once that didn't happen, you're saying, okay, nobody views this guy as being worthy of being a topic on all of the debate shows. You know, every show on FS1 here at Fox is going to be talking about this guy, no matter how much he is going to play. And it's crazy. It's crazy to me that distraction is more terrifying to NFL teams than the distraction of players who do truly heinous things. And look, I know you're going to hear a lot about Shedeur Sanders not interviewing well. Maybe he didn't carry himself well during the pre-draft process. Maybe he thought too highly of himself. Never heard a word about him as like a guy who has run afoul of the law or done anything morally wrong like that. But NFL teams are more comfortable with stuff like that if you kick ass at football. And I guess that's my takeaway here. I get like the NFL just didn't think Shedeur Sanders kicked enough ass at football to be worth the publicity firestorm that would come with him. And now it's on him to prove that was a huge miscalculation. But even the way this looks in Cleveland is awfully strange to me. Again, the Browns drafted Dillon Gabriel the night before in the 3rd round. Questionable decision to a lot of people. No offense to Dillon Gabriel, but a lesser talented prospect in the eyes of most people that cover the NFL draft. You would think that closes the door on drafting another one. Maybe the value was too great. Maybe somebody in the Cleveland facility put their thumb on the scale. Nudge, nudge. That's something that's happened before if you think back a few years. Maybe there was pressure to draft a player that was linked to the Browns in the 1st round. I don't know. But at the end of the day, you have 2 quarterbacks taken within a round of each other, or two rounds of each other. You have Kenny Pickett, who they just acquired in a trade, who has started in the NFL. You obviously have Joe Flacco, who helped this team get to the playoffs just a couple of years ago. And oh, by the way, I don't expect him to factor into the starting job conversation, but Deshaun Watson is still hanging out in Cleveland, or on their roster at least, costing a whole hell of a lot of money. That is 5 different quarterbacks all of whom were a big investment of some sort for the Cleveland Browns, whether in a trade or a free agent contract or a draft pick. I don't know how you sort all that out. Not to get into the weeds, but balancing reps in practice at training camp is tough when you have that many quarterbacks. You potentially got to get Joe Flacco ready for the season. You got to see what you have in these rookies. Kenny Pickett, still a young player. I mean, typically, if you're a third string quarterback, you might get 6 snaps of teamwork in a practice. It might be overshooting it. It might be less than that. There's not a lot of time to work on guys that aren't helping you win in the regular season. So how the Browns manage all of this with the added speculation that comes with the fact that one of these quarterbacks is Shedeur Sanders, I don't know. It's crazy. But I also don't really blame him for doing it. The upside is incredible. Shedeur Sanders, bare minimum, should have been drafted on Friday night. Second round, probably. Third round, definitely. Get him at pick 144, no brainer to me. But now you got to balance figuring out if he can be your quarterback of the future with what serves you best in 2025 and 2026. And oh, by the way, yeah, you added a first round pick for next year. Do you have the confidence to not use that on a quarterback? Can you figure out if Shedeur Sanders or any of these other guys are worth building around for the future? Or are we going to do this all over again? Whether with it's your own draft pick or Jacksonville's draft pick, maybe you package them both. I'm definitely getting ahead of myself, but that's all of the existential stuff that the Cleveland Browns now have to figure out. And oh, by the way, it'll be contrasted against Travis Hunter's career and whether he grows into being the incredible player that so many people expect him to be, whether it's cornerback, receiver, or maybe both. Everything Travis Hunter does from here on out will be compared to the fact that the Cleveland Browns were willing to trade away from him. So yes, I saw the Browns as kind of hanging in the background in this draft. Could not have been anything further from the truth when it was all said and done, because the most high-profile trade in this draft happened with Cleveland, and arguably the most high-profile player, I wouldn't even say arguably, especially now that we have this fall from the top of the draft to the late middle of the draft, fueling, oh my gosh, the next year of the NFL calendar. Yeah, it's not going away anytime soon. And who better to deal with it all than the Cleveland Browns, who haven't always handled scrutiny, controversy, or speculation overly well. Even in a year where they weren't supposed to dominate the draft headlines, the Cleveland Browns managed to do exactly just that. I'm rooting for Shedeur Sanders. I don't think he needed to fall that far. I think he's got a great opportunity in Cleveland to carve out a role for himself, even if he's not an immediate starter or really ever the starter. But what a bizarre story for a team that always manages to be at the top of the news at the wrong time of year. That is the story in Cleveland. Maybe this will be the thing that changes that, whether it's Shedeur or whether it's this trade setting them up for success in the future. Maybe the winds of change are coming, Cleveland Browns fans, but I'd be lying if I said this just didn't feel a little too familiar from false hopes of springs of the past. See how it goes. That's the news in Cleveland, but guess what? There are so many other fun storylines coming out of this draft. So many teams did fun things. Like I said, at least a couple teams did some head-scratching things. I needed some help to parse through it all. So my friend Nick Baumgardner of The Athletic joined me to talk about it. Please check it out. All right, it wouldn't be the draft if we didn't immediately overreact to what we just watched. That's half the fun of the draft. I don't have time to wait 3-4 years. My tongue is firmly planted in my cheek, especially if you are a fan of a team that we're about to criticize. Firmly planted in my cheek. Obviously, we'll see how all of this ages, but you do want to rapidly react to what we just saw. Not only the players taken, but the thought process behind some of these strategies in these NFL front offices. To help me do that, we're joined by Nick Baumgardner of The Athletic, who has been assigning grades for this 2025 draft class throughout the weekend. So who better to talk to about what we just watched play out on Saturday? Nick, I know the answer is tired in general, but overall, how we doing, man?
Doing good. We got through it without Shedeur finally got drafted, so that finally ended, right? The slide no one wanted to stop talking about. So doing well. It was a good draft overall, I'd say.
As a draft Nick, are you like me? And look, I mean, I'm happy Shedeur got drafted. It's nothing personal against him, but as the type of sicko that cares about every day 3 pick, I'm like, guys, I know it's a story, but can we talk about the linebacker that just got drafted? We don't have to go back to Shedeur every 12 minutes, 100%. I promise.
Yeah, like, I mean, I think I got to it was right before he got picked. I want to say it was like middle of round 4. And I was watching NFL Network, and they kept talking about oh, so-and-so, my neighbor called, or my mom called, or somebody called and asked why he hasn't been picked. I'm like, okay, can we actually just somebody pick him so we can move on here and talk about something else? And it got a little tiring there, I'd say, for sure.
Which, I mean, I talked about this earlier on the show, but I think it is going to be the story of the Browns in this draft, one way or another, like between the Travis Hunter trade and Shedeur Sanders. I just feel like 10 years from now, people are going to be like, oh, this was the draft where the Cleveland Browns had all the funky choices. I cannot wait to see if it's like the latest chapter in the Browns' misery, or maybe these choices were what really kickstarted it all for Cleveland. I do think that they are going to be one of the central stories of this draft, but for better and for worse, there are so many other teams worth talking about for good and for ill. So I wanted to pick your brain on a few of those. We're just going to go through some of the ones you like the best and some of the ones that maybe made you scratch your head a little bit. So starting with the best, let's focus on some of these drafts that really knocked it out of the park for you.
One of my favorites, I would say, overall, and it's a theme at this point. It's kind of boring to point them out, but it's the Eagles again. The crazy stuff that happens here, with Jihad Campbell falling to them all the way down at 31 like that. Like, that's just, I mean, he had some labrum issues that I think pushed him down the board, but that to me is a top 15 talent. To follow up and continue down the board and get quality picks. Makuba's a really good player. The safety that they got there in the second round. Ty Robinson in the 4th round is great value. And then we just start going all the way down. Small Munden in the 5th round. I thought he was maybe a round 3 guy. They got him. Drew Kendall, I think, is a really good player who they got there in the 4th round. Very athletic player up front who can move around, play center, play guard. Execute a lot of the stuff that they like in the run game. I love the Kyle McCord pick. I thought Kyle McCord was one of the most underrated quarterbacks in this draft. I think he actually has starting potential, one of the few guys who probably does. And then one of my favorite picks of the draft on day 3 in the 6th round there was Cameron Williams, the giant tackle from Texas, who is sloppy, has a lot of stuff to work on and rough out the edges, but Jeff Stoutland is as good as it gets. He has fixed a lot of guys that have a lot less talent than this guy. And I feel like Cameron Williams, when you talk to people like 6 months ago, they were like, this could be a top 40 talent. This could be a 1st round pick, based on his athleticism. And it's just all across the board. They got value and guys that I thought were better at their slot at every single. Mac McWilliams, the corner, they got it in round 5, also a very good player. So to me, Philly just continues to, take guys that other people overthink, work them into their system, and make it work. It was just a terrific draft.
It really feels like the Eagles, and obviously Baltimore is not very far away from Philadelphia. They just share that DNA of like, yeah, we're not going to overthink this. Maybe you've heard the guy's name, and that's fine. We're just going to take the really good football player that's hanging out there for us. We don't have to get too cute with this. And I think it's fair to point out, because every year at this time, we gush about the Ravens, and we've been gushing about the Eagles for what feels like forever at this point. Mm-hmm. I think it's fair to point out it doesn't always work. Like, not every single one of these picks turns into a superstar, but the hit rate speaks for itself. And even if not every single one of these guys is going to pan out, there is nothing wrong with that strategy of just hanging out and taking the good football player.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned Baltimore, because they're another one, right? Where they sit there and they get Malachi Starks, who falls to them, who everybody, I think, thought, if that guy if there were ever a Raven in this draft, it'd be Malachi Starks. And all these teams just overthink, and then boom, he just falls right into their lap. And they also end up getting Mike Green there in the 2nd round. Obviously, there's some off-the-field issues with him. Again, Philly has had no problem taking guys with off-the-field issues, and Mike Green is probably a top 20 athlete, maybe a top 15 athlete in this draft. And it just is one of those things where the rich get richer. I feel like they have a culture that can handle some of this stuff. Same kind of thing with the Eagles. And, it just works out that way.
I'm glad you said the rich get richer, because that felt like the theme for the Eagles, to keep it on them, where I
Right.
was thinking about this when I was prepping for the show. If I had missed the Super Bowl and I had no idea, if I had missed the entire playoffs and I had no idea that the Eagles just won the Super Bowl, I feel like I could look at their draft and just deduce that based on what they did. Like, this was a team that just had the luxury of taking guys that were there. Like, of course they have needs. Every team in the league has needs, but they're just adding pieces that could be useful later. Like, adding a one technique type of defensive tackle in Ty Robinson. Maybe you'll need him in the future if Jordan Davis doesn't have a long-term future in Philly. Drafting a center, the center from Boston College, Drew Kendall, like 3 days after they extended Cam Jurgens. Like, you just extend a center and you're like, well, not bad to have one of those guys in the pipeline for Jeff Stoutland, the offensive line coach. Jihad Campbell, whether he's off ball or rushing the passer, he probably doesn't need to play a huge role for you right away. It's very much the draft of a team that's like, these guys don't need to hit until year 2, year 3. I mean, if they do it as rookies, that's great, but what a great spot to be in, where you can take guys with a very long-term outlook for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really feel like it's one of those things where they feast on other teams either having, so many needs and they don't have really any. And it's also combined with the fact that if I have so many needs, I have to get this position, I have to get that position. So I'm ignoring all these other talented players. And then sometimes, like a situation like Jihad Campbell, I think people end up they look too deep into things and they get too far into their head and they say, well, he had a labrum issue. Can we really trust him to be, and it's like, well, I mean, he's 20, it's like, I mean, he might overcome it. We don't know. He's a freak athlete. Like, he's a top 15 player in a class that doesn't have a ton of blue chip talent. And then you just go all the way down the board, all the way down to Antoine Powell-Ryland, who they got their last pick, is a good football player, better in a slot than they probably got him at. I think that's the main thing that I see from them, is their board is always one of the most logical things and everybody agrees with it. It's just like, it makes sense. It's like, okay, this guy's falling. Philly will probably pick him. And that seems to happen all the time throughout the draft, almost every year. And, I tweeted something along the lines like, Philadelphia, the Chiefs do this too. But Philly really is the best at it. And it's not just the fact that they've got, an offense that fits Jalen Hurts and, Jalen Carter. Every single pick that they make is logical. It makes sense. And they usually, more often than not, fit the guy in at some point. And it's just, and like you said, they're always drafting 3, 4, 5 years ahead. That's how they plan their cap out. Just a wonderfully run organization overall.
The rich get richer indeed. All right, let's stagger this. Let's jump to maybe one that you didn't like. And I'll just, for my part, Nick, thinking about this while I was prepping, I mean, I came up with a few and I agree with your choices. It was harder for me to find drafts that really confused me, that I really didn't like this year. Like, I can see the vision for the vast majority of the teams in the league, but there are a couple worth hitting on, and I think your first one here is a good place to start, honestly.
Yeah, that's really well said. I agree with you on that. I think a lot of teams really did seem to have a good plan here, but some of them, the Saints were one of the ones that I looked at and said, okay, I don't know what's going on here to a degree. I still don't know the direction of your franchise. I did not like Kelvin Banks to start off with at number 9. I thought that was way too high for him. I thought, if there was a situation where they could have traded out of there, taken an edge, taken a better talent overall, I thought Kelvin Banks was maybe a mid-20s guy who could have even gone down further. I don't even think he was OT3. I would have probably gone with somebody else, but I still don't think I thought that was too high. And then you go into the second round, and at that point, it becomes, okay, we're going to take Tyler Shuck over Shedeur Sanders, and that just doesn't make sense to me. That's one of those things where I look at it and say, you have a head coach who's not very secure in what he's doing, in Kellen Moore. You don't know what your long-term plan is because you don't know what Derek Carr is doing. Your cap is a mess. You've made bad decisions in the draft the last several years. Sean Payton quit the franchise to get out of there so he could go somewhere else. And they just continue to do these things, and they dig themselves in a hole over and over and over. And you can date back to, like I said, Kellen Moore, and they signed Kellen Moore as their coach after everyone else had been hired. And it was like, does anybody want to do this? Okay, you can do it. And that's what it feels like to me. Like, there's not a clear direction at all. And I like Tyler Shuck. I don't dislike him, but like, that didn't make sense. And, if you're going to take the best player, if you're going to take a quarterback there, you take Shedeur Sanders. I'm sorry. And you deal with it. And you have an organization that can handle that, and they just don't. It doesn't make much sense to me. And I like Quincy Riley there in the 4th round. That's a nice pick, but the top 3 picks in this draft, Broughton, I think, was also too high, the defensive tackle there. I'm not sure you can get total 3-down use out of him. I just thought that they could have done a lot more, and they didn't. And, I don't know if this is going to be something where we look back in a year and say maybe they might end up being towards the top of the draft next year, having to do this whole quarterback dance again with a coach who nobody really knows, how sturdy he really is. It doesn't feel like a confident organization to me right now. And I feel like that's what's showing up here.
I know we were joking that there was a little too much Shedeur airtime by the time he finally got drafted, but I think it's worth revisiting briefly just to say, I love the way you laid that out. And it feels like you're already seeing revisionist history where the minute Shedeur started plummeting down the board, the way it flipped from, oh, he's overrated, he never belonged in the top 10 anyway, the way that flipped all the way to like, he's just not good, it gave me whiplash because I was like, look,
yeah.
I'm not trying to tell anybody that Shedeur is a top 10 pick. Maybe he shouldn't have even been a 1st round pick, but to say that he's not even good and to say that all of these guys should have gone above him, I think that is a step too far. If you had to come up with a reason why the Saints would opt for Tyler Shough over Shedeur Sanders, I mean, I know you just said it doesn't make sense, but if you had to do it, do you have anything?
Yeah. To me, it really was the situation of we don't want to deal with all the extra stuff that he's going to bring in, Shedeur. Through some fault of his own, maybe, but maybe not. I mean, he's going to get so much attention every single day. He would get more attention than any other quarterback on your roster. He'd get more attention than any other player on your roster. You would probably have him there at 40 as a backup quarterback. If he's not playing right away, you'd hear chirping. Donald Trump waited on this before on Friday. Like, I just don't know if they were confident enough in their own direction to take a chance on this guy. And I don't think they were the only ones. Like, that's really what was sort of popping up to me as this kind of dragged on. And I'm with you. Like, the pivot from, okay, I don't love him to the point where I'm going to draft him in the top 15 was a completely logical thought to me. And if I don't love him, that I'm not going to draft him in the 1st round, I also completely understood that. But to fall completely out of the 2nd and then out of the 3rd, and then we're sitting here talking about Dillon Gabriel getting drafted above him, like that doesn't make any sense to me. That pick there alone with the Browns, like I was like, and then you take him later, like, are you doing that just to anger him so he'll come in and you think that maybe he'll work harder that way? Like, people got so deep into themselves with this one, I think, to avoid all the baggage that Dion could possibly bring. And then all the media attention that's just going to come with him no matter what. And, I think a lot of people ended up exposing themselves over that because, you just can't, if you want him as a backup quarterback and you're trying to just, galaxy brain your way into thinking somebody else is better when you just look at the tape and say, that's just not true. It got a little bit much for me as it went on. And then you start to kind of agree with the people who are like, this is getting ridiculous. And it kind of was there toward the end there.
It's a weird circumstance where I feel like the right opinion to have about Shedeur is, yeah, he's a perfectly fine, good player.
Quality player.
And you can't have that opinion about Shedeur Sanders, apparently. You gotta love him or you gotta think he's the worst thing to ever come through the NFL draft. So the thing with Tyler Shough for me is it's so contrary to what seems like makes sense for the Saints because he's 26 or he'll be 26 soon. Not only is that bad from an age perspective and, what age will he be if he gets to a 2nd contract, all that stuff, but also having spent 7 years in college, you would think he's the closest thing to a finished product in among the players in this draft class. And so I'm not even talking about his ceiling, but I'm saying, why would this guy sit? And I would assume the Saints prefer that he does because you're still holding on to the hope that Derek Carr could be your starter. But this is not a guy that I want hanging out for 2 years because what's the point? What's the point of a pick 40 quarterback who isn't getting any younger and doesn't have a lot of developing to do? The whole thing's very curious to me.
He's also a guy that's kind of a walking injury report, unfortunately. He's been hurt a ton. Like, that's why he was in college for so long. And you're 100% right. Like, let's say he sits for the year and he's just developing rust and then he gets hurt again somehow. And it's just like, that to me was like such a forced situation that it just doesn't make any sense. Like, if you're going to take a guy there and you don't have faith or whatever in Derek Carr being healthy, to me, it should have been a guy that you thought that you would have thought, hey, he can conceivably maybe be good enough to start a game for us next year when the whole thing gets going. That to me was Sanders. The three quarterbacks in this draft that you could say that about, I thought, were Cam Ward, Jaxson Dart, and Shedeur Sanders. And it really did stop at a hard line after that. Everybody else, including Milroe and Shuck and all the other guys down the board, are going to need a little bit of time, or they're never going to get there. And that's fine too. But like, to me, the three guys in this draft that conceivably could turn into functioning starters are, like the guys that went in the first round and then Shedeur. And it just like, it became a conversation about everything but football at some point. And for a league that, is super competitive and likes to keep things all about football, that this just wasn't that. And it wasn't a good look in the end there.
The irony with the Saints is I actually liked their first pick a little bit more than you, Kelvin Banks. Not saying he's
some did.
Not that he's even amazing. It's just, it's a safe pick for a team that doesn't know where it's going. If you take a quarterback at that 9 spot, that's crazy to me. I don't know what a receiver is going to do in that spot with the quarterback situation. So Kelvin Banks could play tackle. He could play guard. Doesn't really matter as long as he's a good player. So when they did that, I was like, oh man, the Saints have their heads on straight. And then 24 hours later,
it fell apart.
24 hours later, I was changing my tune. So we'll see. We'll see what that looks like in 2026, I guess. All right, let's bounce back to another favorite. And this is a team that I think is definitely worth the spotlight. They've been in obscurity for a little bit here, but I am excited about what the New England Patriots did this weekend.
Yeah, the evil empire might be coming back here pretty soon. I mean, this was Mike Vrabel. They built this draft in the mold of their new head coach. I felt like Will Campbell at the top, one of my favorite players in the class, one of the hardest workers in the class. I mean, everybody who saw him on the stage there and the answers that he gave about, I'll fight and die to protect Drake Maye, that's all genuine. That's who he is. You talk to anybody who's worked with him, and they never say anything but amazing things. And then the toughness just continued. Travion Henderson is one of the toughest players pound for pound in the class. I thought Jared Wilson was a phenomenal pick there for them as well. You've suddenly been able to flip your line. The one good piece they have there, I feel like, is Mike Onwenu, the right tackle. Campbell can play left tackle. I think Jared Wilson's a guy who could start pretty quickly too. So suddenly you've got a lot of hope right there on the offensive line. You've got a 3-down running back who can help Drake Maye. And then you just got value pick after value pick as the day went on. Kyle Williams there in the 3rd round. I don't want to overlook him. I thought he was another guy that was wildly underrated in the pre-draft process. Not a lot of people talked about him, but I feel like he's one of those guys that is going to be like an Amon-Ra St. Brown type guy who's just always open, always dependable, will catch the ball, will keep the chains moving while they want to run the football and be physical. To get Josh Farmer and Braden Swinson, Farmer, the defensive tackle from Florida State, and Swinson, the edge there from LSU. Both of those guys I thought were day 2 picks, high day 2 picks. They got them in round 4 and 5. And, it just keeps going on and on. They even got a kicker in this thing. So, I mean, they really did help change sort of the DNA of their franchise in this draft. And when you're rebuilding like this, you've already got your quarterback, and that's good. And Drake Maye's, I think, going to be just fine. He was able to survive, everything that happened last season. And now you enter this draft and say, we want to get physical, we want to get tougher. And they attacked that. Craig Woodson, the safety from Cal, also I think fits that mold too. They attacked that all the way across the board. You could see exactly where they were going, exactly what they want to do. It all lines up with everything that we know about Mike Vrabel. And I just feel like it's not going to take very long for that team, because you've got so many workers on it. You've got young, hungry guys who are workers, who are going to be good football players. Maybe they all won't be all pros or whatever, but they're going to help change a culture, improve everything else there. And it just made a lot of sense with everything they did. So a great draft for a team that, like you said, has been really kind of up against it the last few years. They got the break last year with Drake Maye, and now suddenly maybe things will go back in the right direction here a little bit for them. I guess we'll find out.
The players obviously have to hit, right? I mean, they have to be good players, and that's what we don't know. But if you want to get your fan base excited, this is what it looks like, where not only are you attacking the things that you need, but you're doing it with value. It's one thing to reach for a guy because you need one, but like you said, the value lined up everywhere they went. And I know some Patriots fans were disillusioned or disappointed at their activity in free agency. People thought they were going to go get a T. Higgins or somebody like that, and it didn't really materialize. But then you come out of this. I mean, Drake Maye needed an offensive line. He's got 2 guys right away that can contribute early. You got one of the most exciting running backs to pair with Ramondre Stevenson. You mentioned Kyle Williams. I know a lot of people are really high on him. just go ahead, just add 5 guys to the offense
Yeah.
for Drake Maye that you're hoping can play a role and do it quickly. Like I said, they have to do it. That's what makes the draft so interesting. But the thought process is unassailable.
Absolutely. I mean, I really think if you look at they got 7 starters, I feel like, in their top 7 picks. I think Campbell, Henderson, Williams, Wilson, Woodson, Farmer, and Swinson are all guys I think that can start for that football team either next year or very quickly after that, or maybe even as time goes on, into next year. That's what you want to do. Like when you're one of those teams who looks at a draft and says, look, guys, we need talent everywhere. Let's just go get tough football players who can come in here and fight their tails off for a job. And when you're talking about your first, guys in the top 100, top 150, they really need to be guys. If you're a team like that, they got to be guys that can come in there and start, come in there and make something happen, not guys that you're going to have to wait around for, 18 months for them to figure it out. That is not going to be the case with almost any of those guys at the top. I feel like, even Farmer and Swinson, I feel like those guys are good enough to come in and at least be heavy rotational players to do something for you right away. But you've got 2 offensive linemen who I think are rookies who can come in and start for you and be pretty good. And like, to me, that is exactly what you want to do in a rebuild. They got the quarterback first, and then did it this way. It's going to work out. I feel like for them, but they're going to look back on this one, I think, and really be excited. And like you said, it's a way to get that fan base excited too, because even if you're a casual Patriots fan, you look at that draft and you say, okay, I get this. This makes sense. I understand where they're going. It makes a lot of sense. There's a plan here. I can feel better about all this. And like, to me, that's a win-win-win all the way. And I think people have a right to be excited again, finally in New England a little bit.
I really do love that Vrabel found a kicker too, because I know he's
and a good one.
He's a glass-eating, ass-kicking linebacker. He's also he's a coach that likes to win on the margins, and special teams matter to guys like that. I love that he's going to go out and get a good kicker, and even in this pass-happy era where kicking is looked down on, Mike Vrabel still wants to play that way.
Absolutely. I think it all goes in line with, hey, if we're going to have to win the game tough, we're going to be a tough football team. We might win by a field goal. Let's let them make mistakes. We're young, we're hungry, we're grinding. You need special teamers too. And that's another thing. I think most of those guys, Travion Henderson will play special teams if you ask him to. Like that's another thing too. I think a lot of these guys that they pick, they're good special teams players, down into the Marcus Bryants and Ashbys and Kobe Minor at the bottom there. So they really did hit every box. I mean, I think that if you look at everything they needed, they hit it and then some, and that's exactly what you want.
If you are not a draft Nick, if you're not a film head during this entire process, and you are a Patriots fan, go find some footage of Travion Henderson in pass protection specifically. I mean, You don't need me to tell you he's a good running back, but go find some footage of him laying into blitzers, and you'll get your blood pressure up a little bit. All right. Let's wrap on this one because I know you've had a long day, Nick. One more team, and I'm with you on this one. It was a weird weekend for the NFC South, in my opinion. The Atlanta Falcons. I'll call it a bold draft in Atlanta.
It was bold. It's bold, all right. I think that's fair to say. It's weird to say it because I do like some of these players. Like I really like Jalen Walker. I really like Xavier Watts. I don't know why we're taking 2 safeties back-to-back, and I don't know why we're taking 2 edges back-to-back and trading a future first-rounder to get a guy in James Pierce, who was probably the biggest character concern in this draft outside of the kid from Marshall there, who we just talked about earlier. Mike Green. Yeah, I mean, like Pierce, there were teams that you talked to and scouts that you talked to back at the combine, after the combine, that were like, he's not on our day 1 or day 2 board. Everything we heard about this kid was, they couldn't coach him at Tennessee. They couldn't get him to play hard. A lot of I'd heard that some of the coaches kind of stopped trying midway through the season because he was just kind of on his own island doing whatever he wanted. And we're trading up for that, and we're giving up that much to do it. Like that, to me, for a team that needs a ton of stuff and a team that just went through this quarterback mess that they had last year, really not a great usage of the capital here. I feel like, it's hard to really bang on it too bad because I do think Jalen Walker is a really, really good football player. So at least they didn't, they had him fall to them. That works out. He's a Georgia kid. People are going to like that. I do like Xavier Watts, but I don't know why we need to take back-to-back safeties. I don't know why, you're trading up for Pierce and giving up extra assets. I don't know why we're allowing a general manager, if we're Atlanta, who might be on the hot seat, to trade away future assets like that for a guy who's a risk. Like, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And it's bold is the right word, and maybe we'll all, maybe I'll eat crow on it and those guys will be phenomenal players. But that to me speaks a little bit more of like, hey, we're smarter than everybody else. We know something that nobody else does. And it's like, nah, I don't think that's rarely true. And then that's what this kind of felt like to me to a degree.
This is the thing that drives me crazy about it is that Terry Fontenot, the GM in Atlanta, was a crucial part of the front office in New Orleans that
Right.
tried this already. In 2018, they traded a future first to go up for Marcus Davenport in that draft, and it did not work. And now, I mean, the two players are not the same. I know Davenport was a more developmental prospect, a guy that you were hoping would grow and hit a ceiling. Whereas I think James Pierce is a more ready-made player. Maybe that helps, but giving up a future first for a non-quarterback is just crazy to me because it suggests that you think your draft grades are gospel. And we know damn well that even the best people in this industry whiff. Like every single general manager, even the best ones, have some really embarrassing misses on their resumes. And to feel that confident in your grade that it is worth next year's one, it's absolutely bat insane.
I 100% agree. Yeah. I mean, I hate comparing like every team's situation to another, but so I hate comparing Atlanta to like Philly or Baltimore, the teams we were just talking about. But this really is, their strategy really is kind of the opposite of what we just talked about the teams that always end up doing this right, where, they're sound with what they're doing. They scout properly. They don't take ridiculous chances on hunches or give up a bunch of stuff that they don't need to give up. They play the board. They end up taking more picks in usually by just, taking advantage of other teams, kind of like Atlanta. Like the Rams are a great example of this too, a team that really had to grind over the last several years to get a bunch of picks. And I'm sure when Atlanta called them, they were like, oh yeah, let's do it. 30 seconds, we get this trade taken care of and we're out of here. What a deal for the Rams. And then if you're Atlanta, you're going up and you're sitting there thinking, okay, well, who could this possibly be? Are they going to take another quarterback? Like, what's going to happen? And then it's James Pierce. And you're just like, okay, that you could have conceivably maybe gotten him in the second round. Or if you were in the second round and he was still sliding, you could have gone up. You could have gone up and got him. Nobody underneath those guys were going to roll the dice on James Pierce. Like that to me, just like you said, I mean, if you're not going up for a quarterback and you're giving up a first round pick, like that just doesn't compute in my world. They already did that last year and everything else. And I just, it's another team kind of like New Orleans, right? It's hard to see what the direction is here other than sort of like desperate flailing to a degree. And, last year was kind of a mess. I just don't see this year being too much better, quite frankly, which is a shame because they do have talent. Bijan and those guys are good football players, but, we'll see what happens.
It creates such an insane threshold too, where you're picking at the back of the first round or even in the middle of the first round, you take an edge rusher. I'm like, hey, well, it's a really hard position to play. There aren't that many elite edge rushers in football. There just aren't. That's why they always go top 5 when you have them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just draft James Pierce and he's a 4 to 6 sack a year guy, I'm like, hey, that's good. That's a good player.
Right.
What else are you hoping to find late in the first round? But to trade away a future one and basically have him be a 2 first-round pick player.
Right, a double pick, yeah.
I need more, man. I need perennially 8 plus sacks, preferably double-digit sacks. It creates such a high ceiling. And look, if Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr. are the next great duo, I mean, if they're the Bash brothers and they rack up double-digit sacks together every year for the next 5 years, Falcons fans, come find me. I'll personally apologize, but
I'll apologize to Terry Fontenot.
It's such a high bar to meet. It is such a high bar to meet. And Terry, back-to-back edges, back-to-back safeties. Last year, he signs Kirk Cousins and drafts Michael Penix Jr. Like, the guy just loves to have 2 of everything, I guess. And that doesn't seem like it's not an efficient way to run a football team, I don't think. Not when you've got 22 different players on the field in a given game.
Yeah, it almost feels like, the strategy is, well, if this guy bombs, we've taken this other guy who will maybe not bomb, and it's like, well, no, that's not how it works. Because I mean, like you nailed it. It's like you spent 2 first-round picks on James Pierce here, guys. Like you've spent more on James Pierce than you did on Jalen Walker, and and it's just like, and a guy that is a bigger risk and a bigger gamble. And if we're taking away all the off the field stuff, James Pierce to me is really kind of only a third down guy. I don't know how much you're even going to get from him against the run on first or second down. So it's just, It was such a stretch. To me, it was the biggest stretch of the first round, and it just was the one that made the least amount of sense. And then, to see everything that they ended up giving up, they only had 5 picks in this draft. Like, this is not a team that can afford to do this. They're just not that good. And I just feel like there's a lot of lying to themselves, maybe a little bit going on there. And maybe an echo chamber situation. I don't know, but it doesn't feel great to me. I would not be clicking my heels if I was an Atlanta fan.
It's so interesting too. The variance is crazy because we didn't see enough of Penix to know for sure what he is. If he's a stud, then none of this probably matters, and the Falcons are smarter than all of us. And
Right.
if he's not a stud, then James, even if James Pierce is a stud, that's probably not good enough to save anybody's job.
Exactly.
So this whole, I don't know, the Penix part leaves room for them to still be a really good team, but otherwise this could be a real disaster here in the next 18 months,
Yeah.
maybe less time. Who knows?
I mean, I feel like if they're good, it's going to be almost in spite of themselves, right? That's kind of what it feels like. Like, if it works, it's going to work in spite of the risks that you took, and it didn't need to be this hard. And that to me is kind of the rub here. It's like, when you look at the teams that really function well in the draft, they don't make it hard on themselves. They just don't. They take the logical choice, and if they take a risk on somebody in the middle of the rounds, you can be sure every guy after that is going to be a very sound draft pick. And that to me is, they value other teams like this. They value picks. Atlanta doesn't value picks. I mean, you cannot operate in this league by just throwing these picks around like they're willy-nilly and not worrying about the consequence that might come later. It doesn't feel like good business.
That is the fun of this, though. And I agree with you completely. I think it's a terrible process. I'm baffled by it. But we see teams trip over their own feet and find an all-pro all the time. And then we're the ones that were wrong. That's what makes this so incredibly fun. Nick, this was a blast, man. I appreciate it. I know it was a long few days for you, so I really appreciate you taking the time. We'll catch up soon, man.
Absolutely. Guys, take care. Thanks a lot.
Thanks again to Nick Baumgardner for hopping on to help me go over the draft. Thanks to y'all for tuning in. Hope it was as fun of a weekend for you as it was for me. We're going to let this episode breathe a little bit, let the draft process digest. As I'm recording this, teams are still hard at work signing undrafted players, finishing up their rosters. So I'm guessing there's going to be some movement to talk about next time we're on. We'll be back later in the week. Plenty of other stuff to assess coming out of the draft. Like I said, I bet there will be some news to process as well. The draft is done. The news in the NFL never stops, though. Make sure you are subscribed to our feed if you're not. Go find us on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. We will have all the latest as we continue to react to this NFL draft schedule release as well. We found out over draft weekend. That'll be coming out May 14th. We'll have you covered on that as well. Like I said, just subscribe. Go find us on YouTube. However you prefer to get your podcast, we will be there to help you out. Until then, appreciate it so much, and I will talk to y'all next time.